Just testing out the sound here. Tell me if anything is not quite right, but I think I've got it dialed in. So, hi, first of all, and welcome to Level Up Guitar, where you come to level up your playing. I'm Kalen, and today we're going to talk about what most teachers never tell you, and how to become a great guitarist. So the first thing today is, let's just jump right into it. You need to be able to recognize problems, and problems come in all sorts of forms. It could be anything from a technique problem to your understanding of the fretboard or music theory, or even psychological problems such as, feeling nervous that you're going to play a wrong note, or even to the point of being afraid to play anything. I've had students come in who are so nervous when they first start that they can't even play a note. Their hands are just shaking uncontrollably. So, this is probably not you, but just to say that there's all kinds of problems, psychological, knowledge-based, and let's talk about one example, which falls under the category of pinky problems. So your pinky is almost always the weak link. So this is something that a lot of people struggle with. And one of the pinky problems that I find to be the most common is called flying pinky. So I'll just play a simple part of a scale and I'll demonstrate what happens when you have flying pinky. And then I'm going to tell you how to work on solving the problem. So you see how as I'm playing through that scale, the pinky kind of, after you use it, it's hard for me to even do it, but the pinky flies out away from the fretboard. And if that's happening to you, here's something you can do to work on it. This is called a combination exercise. And all you do is you choose a combination of 4 fingers. Let's say 1, 3, 2, 4. And, you should do this with a metronome. So I'm not sure if you're going to be able to hear this, but this is my handy metronome app. And so there's my tempo. It's 83 beats per minute, and I'm going to play through this exercise nice and slow. Now, as you're doing this, you can start to watch your fingers, and the goal here is to make sure that you're keeping all of your fingers close to the strings, regardless of which one you happen to be using at the time. And once you get your pinky under control, you can also use this exercise to work on other things like, are you relaxed? Are you breathing? Is there any tension in your shoulders, your left or right hand? So this is a great exercise, pinky aside. Even if your pinky is fine, I always have students work on this exercise when they first come in, just to see how they handle it, to see how their bodies are when they're playing something super simple. So that's pinky stuff. And that's, one example of recognizing problems and working on solutions. So everyone's got different problems. You have to make note when you notice something. You might not always remember it later. Make note when you're working on stuff. If you notice a problem, if you notice, I actually don't know the second of my 5 positions very well, write it down in your notebook. You should always have a notebook of stuff that you're working on, even if it's just, your note app on your phone. Write it down, come back to it and say, okay, I wanted to work on that, the Dorian position, whatever it is. So number 2, after recognizing problems and working towards solutions, the second thing a lot of teachers will not tell you to do at least not enough, is to work on learning melodies. People focus so much on learning the fretboard and learning how to improvise and take like a cool flashy pentatonic solo, and that's all great stuff, but if there's no melodic content in your vocabulary to work with, then all of the flashy pentatonic stuff doesn't mean anything. It loses all of its meaning, actually, if it's all you do. So this learn melodies, this ties right in with listen to singers, learn more vocabulary. Those are two other points that I want to talk about in a minute. Don't just learn a melody. When you learn a melody, don't just learn it in one place. It's really important if you're learning something, it can be just a simple phrase. So you see how I'm moving around the fretboard as I'm playing that melody? I could have played that. I could have played that here. But being able to play it in more than one place, experimenting with it, moving around the neck, seeing what the options are in terms of how the ergonomics of the hand positioning fall for that particular phrase in one given position versus another, versus playing at cross positions as you're playing it. That's the kind of stuff that will take you from being a good guitarist to a great guitarist. So, okay, don't just learn the melodies in one place, learn them in different positions, different octaves even, different fingerings, but most importantly, be expressive when you're playing melodies. So, okay, not very expressive, but so it's hard for me to even play the exact same thing when I'm trying to be expressive as I played when I'm not being expressive, but you get the idea. It's the difference between just playing the notes. So I'll give you a standard blues phrase, for example. So let's add to those last two notes on it. So that is without any expressive add-ons in playing that phrase. And it doesn't sound that interesting. But if we add some vibrato here and a bend there, finish it off with some vibrato, it makes all the difference. So be expressive. Actually, this is a perfect segue into my next point, which is listen to singers. A student came in that I've been working with for a few weeks now, and he was saying that he's into B.B. King right now. He's going through a blues phase, and he brings up the track, The Thrill Is Gone. And I said, great track, awesome track, let's listen to it. And we start listening to it, and I start pointing out, the first thing I do is I start pointing out the melody, and I start kind of dissecting how I would emulate the vocal phrasing on the guitar. And he's sitting there looking at me like, what? I thought we were doing guitar stuff. Like, he thought the important thing was to try and figure out B.B. King's guitar playing. And so he was really surprised when I was like, no, listen to the melody. Listening to great singers who have great phrasing, there's nothing as important. I mean, if you ask anyone who knows anything, they'll tell you, yes, listen to great singers. So The Thrill Is Gone. So that, if you listen to the track, that little ending to the phrase, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. If you listen to the vocal phrasing of that, that's what it sounds like. It doesn't just sound... No. No, you gotta go. So you're doing a pull off back into a slide there. That's one of my favorite types of expressive techniques that you can use to sound more like a singer. Okay, let's move on because I wanted this to be a quick live stream today, just making a few points here. The next thing that you should be doing, and that any good teacher will hopefully tell you to do, but a lot of teachers won't, is to come up with your own vocabulary. So this means composing licks, phrases, repeat them and remember them. When I was at Oberlin studying jazz studies, I would do this with like jazz licks that I composed, but it's the same thing if you're playing rock or blues. You know, if you've got something that so or whatever it is, whatever the phrases are that you're working with, even if they're not your own compositions, definitely you need to repeat them enough times so that they're in your muscle memory. So not everyone's a composer, fine. But really you should be coming up with your own vocabulary. And that can be based on vocabulary that you learn from somewhere else. It can be based on a melody that you learn from a song. It can be based on a solo that you transcribe. It's just, if you want to be able to improvise, and I think that is one of the hallmarks of becoming a great guitarist, you need to be working on vocabulary, and to come up with your own voice, your own style, you need to be working on composing your own vocabulary and ingraining it into your muscle memory, into your musical memory, so that you know when to use it. So that's vocabulary. I think that after internalizing it, you could forget it at some point. And so that's why I always like to write it down. If you're working on a whole new set of vocabulary every year, for example, it's really easy to forget like a couple phrases that you came up with 2 years ago. You might just kind of lose them. But if you go back through whatever your notebook is, you can find these phrases and be like, oh, like that actually could work really well with some of the new stuff that I'm working on now. They're just, lost gems that you can find. Write it down. It's easier said than done, but even if writing it down just means recording it and keeping sort of a, keeping a list of voice memos where you have your guitar stuff versus other random voice memos. I know everybody uses the voice memo app on their phone for a million things. So I use it for guitar stuff all the time, but I always label them guitar, and then some brief description of whatever I worked on, even if it's guitar lick in E or guitar A blues riff. So, okay, the last thing I want to talk about today is challenge yourself. And you might be like, okay, obviously you want to be challenging yourself, but a lot of people don't. For a lot of people, and this is maybe the difference between if guitar is a hobby for you or if it's a pursuit. And this is, maybe a semantic conversation, but for most people, it's a pursuit. Even people who do it more casually, they have the goal of becoming better at it. They want to achieve a certain level of mastery with the instrument. So in order to do that, you have to be challenging yourself. Start doing the things that you think you aren't good enough to do. So for example, playing across different positions. This doesn't mean playing in one position and then playing in another. Let's say we're in the key of G and to play something in A Dorian position there. That's good if you can play in one position and then shift to another. But to be able to play across the positions, and this actually ties in with coming up with your own vocabulary, because to play across the positions, you need to be able to shift in a way that works well melodically and is also ergonomically achievable, so that your technique doesn't start to get in the way of sounding musical. So playing across different positions, this is something I'm actually working on a little bit right now. I really like this in-between position here between the C Lydian and the D Mixolydian position. You can get a lot of mileage out of these half steps that exist here. Whoa. Turned into G blues there, but you get the point. I think is to be able to play across the positions. This is, everybody learns their 5 positions and they're like, I'm done. Now I just have to get faster at playing with those positions. But you listen to guys like Eric Johnson, Alan Holdsworth. These are guys that I'm really loving listening to right now, by the way. And they are playing across the positions. They're not just staying in one position, shifting, playing in another position. That's not how it works. So an example of this could be as simple as playing in your extended minor pentatonic scale. So most people know their pentatonic scale here. That's great if you can play in one position, but if you can play the extensions on both sides, now you're playing across different positions. So it can be that simple. But if you're already comfortable with that, try starting to come up with phrases that bridge the gap between the different positions. And you'll notice that when I'm doing that, I'm kind of looking at string sets. And that's another concept I really like to talk about, which we won't talk about today, but I'll probably do a lesson on that soon. So if you like some of the stuff I'm talking about, hit the subscribe button. The last thing today is I want to talk about listening to music, because we don't make enough time today to listen to music. I think, in addition to just listening to music, watch videos of guitarists you like. It's so easy now to have access to, I want to learn how, Jimi Hendrix played. Okay, there's plenty of videos online. I want to learn how Eric Clapton played. Look up videos of guitarists that you're into right now. See how they're approaching the instrument. It's never been easier. There's never been a point in history where it's been easier to do this. So there's no excuse. Just go on YouTube, search for a track from your favorite guitarist, and type the word live after. And not only for your guitar playing, but for your enjoyment of music in general. I mean, you should be doing this anyway, because you should want to see live videos of your favorite guitarists. Just realized I haven't been paying any attention to the chat this whole time, but I seem to have lost it. Okay, all right, there it is. Yeah, if anybody's watching and has any questions, feel free to type them into the chat. Always happy to answer questions. And that said, if you want, I'm going to put a link to my Patreon in the description so that you can get in contact and you can support me for as little as $3 a month there if you like my content. That's not what we're here for, but just in case you're interested and you want to connect a little bit further. So I think I've gotten through everything. The only other thing I want to say, and this is probably the most important thing in terms of efficiency in your practicing, is to realize the point of diminishing returns when you're working on something. So usually it's way, way sooner than you think it is. A technique exercise like the one we were talking about earlier, for example, the combination exercise, the point of diminishing returns on something like that is maybe 3 minutes, maybe 5 at the most. But, sometimes people get caught up in doing technique stuff and they'll be doing this for 10, even more, 10, 15 minutes, they'll be working on that one exercise. Don't do that. And same with anything, really. You need to realize the point of diminishing returns. It's usually not more than 10 minutes. Sometimes 15 if you're working on a set of changes or a long form of a song where, you have a slow tempo and you're playing through it. You want to play through a few times. Maybe then 15, 20 minutes. But most of the time you've reached the point of diminishing returns way sooner than you realize. So set a timer when you're practicing is what I recommend. When you're working on one thing, especially if you're limited in the amount of time you have to practice and you're trying to work on a few different things, set a timer so each segment of your practice time is shorter than you probably think it needs to be. That's it, I think, for today. Any questions in the chat? No? All right. Well, I hope you learned something, and like and subscribe for more tips, tricks, and secrets from Level Up Guitar. See you in the next one.